Right back out of here, hour number one of the early line, Sirius XM channel 159. It is a Tuesday morning, and it's never the offseason, it feels like, in the NFL. The NFL has built itself up, guys, as a 365 league. Like every single day, 24/7, news is coming out. And also, just to keep the people updated here, today's the last day you can franchise tag a player on your team. There are some big players out there still left maybe in a little bit of limbo. Are they going to get signed? Are they going to get tagged? Are they going to be moving on? L'Jarius Sneed, real quick, by the way, also one of those players that did get the non-exclusive tag officially here for the Kansas City Chiefs. So if they don't sign him, he can work around the NFL with his agent, try to find a deal that suits himself, and also compensation back for the Kansas City Chiefs. But the main issue of the day here yesterday, which is quite shocking, because the one thing we do know about Russell Wilson coming over to the Denver Broncos, we thought we were going to get a quarterback that was going to give you electricity, just like he gave you in Seattle. And yes, maybe he lost a step and maybe he's a little bit banged up leaving Seattle, but we didn't anticipate any of the downfall that we've seen coming out of the Denver Broncos. Nathaniel Hackett was an absolute disaster as the head coach for the Denver Broncos. No getting around that. They go out and make a move to get Sean Payton. Like it would be a marriage that would be made perfectly, because if you're looking at Russell Wilson, Nathaniel Hackett, again, if we just get back to Hackett here in Denver, it was a disaster. Everything was wrong. He goes over to the Jets, even more of a disaster. So maybe we're just chalking it up there saying, you know what? Once Russell Wilson gets a legitimate head coach that can help him out and certainly draw up game plans that benefit him, you're probably going to see some success in Denver, and rightfully so. They gave up a lot of draft capital and signed Russell Wilson to basically a $250 million extension. Nobody in that Denver Mile High area thought that was going to be a bad deal. Hey, look, you got to pay a premium to get a quarterback. You got a quarterback that's probably on a trajectory that might end up in Canton. We got to take a swing at this. And boy, oh boy, was it a disaster. Not only was it a disaster, because sometimes you could take a look and say, well, the play just wasn't there. Like, we didn't make any Super Bowls with Russ, but it was a good 5-year run. It just didn't work out, and we go our separate ways here. But the fact of the matter is, you move that draft capital, which, again, hurts your program already. Secondarily, you pay all that money out, and you're expecting Pro Bowl caliber football play out of your quarterback. And certainly coming over from the Seattle Seahawks, we expected that. Sean Payton's a very good head coach. Sean Payton did wonderful things with the New Orleans Saints, which included winning a Lombardi trophy. Now, we were expecting Sean Payton to come over right away and win a Lombardi with the Denver Broncos. No, but the one thing we expected was a competent quarterback position. That should have been the last thing that Sean Payton was worried about coming over from the New Orleans Saints. And also, if we can get back to the reason why he chose the Denver Broncos, do you think he actually chose the Broncos going, you know what? We traded away a lot of draft capital to get Russell Wilson. I don't even like Russell Wilson. So my job is going to come in there and railroad him and have this massive dead cap space hit here, and then I'll get my quarterback. Absolute nonsense here. The reason why Sean Payton partly chose the Denver Broncos was the reason why he didn't think he had to worry about the quarterback position. He had a veteran guy that's been to Super Bowls, won Super Bowls, and was one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL over the past decade. I have that figured out. Let me just figure out who the running back's going to be, the offensive line, the wide receivers. Can they mesh with Russell Wilson? And away we go. And none of that worked out. You take a look at the NFL standings last year, particularly in the AFC West, and a lot of people had high hopes for the Denver Broncos. Once again, maybe not winning the Super Bowl, but possibly challenging the Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC West. Look at those standings. Kansas City 11-6 last year. Las Vegas Raiders 8-9, tied with the Denver Broncos at 8-9. And we saw that roller coaster ride last year from the Denver Broncos, where it was like, okay, maybe we're getting some things out of Russ. They even beat the Kansas City Chiefs, but also you hit that turmoil late in the season, which got the NFLPA locked into a battle once again by saying, now hold on. If the information we're getting out of the Denver Broncos is correct here, fellas, you can't do this to a player. They basically told Russell Wilson, give up your guarantees or we're not playing you anymore. And rightfully so, Russell Wilson looked at that and said, you know what? I'm not giving up my guarantees. They were written into my contract for this specific reason here. If I get injured, if I play, I don't care. I want my money here. I'm a top quarterback. I deserve that. So basically, Sean Payton, the Denver Broncos, gave an ultimatum to Russell Wilson that didn't work out in his favor. And they said, you know what? We'll just move on from you. And then the charade late in the season was, hey, you know what? Well, he's still our quarterback for next year. I still think he's going to be worthwhile. We just couldn't play him. It's strictly a football move. Guys, we know, even though Russell Wilson didn't have a great season, that was not a football move. That was a financial move here, saying if we make the move in the offseason, we are going to have Russell Wilson healthy, because if he's injured, we can't make any moves. $37 million would be initially guaranteed to him, whether he played or not, and they couldn't afford that. So going into the offseason, they had two choices they were going to make, which is wild to think about. Russell Wilson, either that was going to be traded. And if anybody's looking at the trade market out here for Russell Wilson saying, you know what? He might be a valuable quarterback on another franchise. The fact of the matter is, what other franchise was going to take on this contract in its entirety here with all those cap hits? They're not crazy. They weren't going to do that. And you know, rightfully so, the Denver Broncos were making their phone calls around the league on Russell Wilson to try to say, where can he land? Can we get any sort of compensation? Heck, even a 7th-round draft pick to get this number off the books. Now, still trading him, you would have incurred a cap hit here, but it wouldn't have been accelerated because with that move, you could have spread that out over a number of years. Now you're getting that $85 million with cutting Russell Wilson that accelerates into the next 2 years. Now, granted, the Denver Broncos, if they wanted to, could have that entire cap hit in 2024. But I don't care how high the salary cap goes up, affording $85 million for one football player. That's not for the whole team. That's one football player. So you know other guys are getting cut and moved around. Let's just say the Denver Broncos had a dead cap space this year of close to $100 million. How could they even operate as a football team here? And the questions abound where is Russell Wilson going to go from here? So he's released. Anybody in the NFL can sign Russell Wilson. Here's the interesting part about it. Who would be available for Russell Wilson? Now, granted, if he is cut, here's the big deal. If you wanted Russell Wilson under the contract the Denver Broncos had, there's very few suitors who are going to do that because you're taking on a quarterback that you maybe see has lost a step and also has been injured in the past couple of years. You don't want to take on that commitment. But now the commitment, guys, is all on the Denver Broncos. Once you cut Russell Wilson is going to get paid by the Denver Broncos next year. So let's just say he goes to a new organization, maybe even as the starting quarterback. Let's just take the Atlanta Falcons, even though I don't think that's a possibility of a landing spot for him. But let's just use them. Looking for a quarterback, they sign him. But let's just say they sign him to a veteran minimum contract. 1 year, $2 million. That offsets that $37 million that he's guaranteed for the Denver Broncos. So essentially, the new football team that gets Russell Wilson, guys, they're going to get him for free. So no longer are you saying, well, I don't want to take Russell Wilson because, number one, I'm going to give up a massive, haul of packages to get him, or draft picks, I should say. That's not going to happen. But also, I don't even want to trade a 7th-round pick for Russell Wilson because I'm going to incur his long-term contract here. So now that he's technically a free agent immediately, anybody can give him a flyer here. Now, granted, we heard some crazy stories about him winding up on the Jets and backing up Aaron Rodgers. Look, that's not going to fly. So you're trying to find a team that he actually fits with, and maybe it's one of those circumstances I talked about yesterday on the radio on Moneyline. If you're looking at Russell Wilson, maybe there's no guarantees that he's on an NFL roster to start the season because, quite frankly, even if you think Russell Wilson is solid, you're not going to bring him onto your team if you already have a franchise quarterback. Jalen Hurts in Philadelphia, Aaron Rodgers with the New York Jets, who, again, I don't think they're going to sign Russell Wilson as a backup. You take a look at Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert. You get the picture here. You don't want that turmoil and say, you know what, we have a secondary quarterback here. If you don't perform, we're going to go to Russell Wilson. We're going to go to Russell Wilson as opposed to the starter, whoever we have at this point. So if you're looking for a team that's going to bring him in, it's going to be one of those teams possibly that has a quarterback injury late in the season. Right? We've seen it before. Joe Flacco did it last year with the Cleveland Browns. Maybe Russell Wilson goes, I'm getting a free year here. Let me sit this out. Let me relax. Let me rehab. Let me heal my body and my mind. And maybe by the month of October or November, a team that we thought would be a contender lost their starting quarterback, and I can step into the fold. I'll be a cheap addition because, once again, the Denver Broncos will be paying me at this point. But at the same time, I might be just as effective just getting that reset on my career, going to a different organization and see if it can work out. The one thing we do know, this is a wild scenario, maybe a cautionary tale for the future. All these quarterbacks, all this money out here, boy, oh boy, sometimes when it doesn't work out in your favor, it can absolutely wreck your roster and your franchise for the next 2 to 3 years. We'll see how Denver responds from this with Russell Wilson, but he is going to be on the move, and so is the early line. Joe Ranieri coming into our lives, people. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.